because you may need, even if you're here, you might have the need to go back and study some of this stuff up. Okay? Now, we are going to start the overall topic, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and the first subtopic is 1963 at a glance. And you remember when we do these, I tell you something kind of interesting that happened in each month. And this is going to lead us right to November of 1963 and the assassination. So we'll start with January. January 29th, 1963. You'll need to refer to your topic and subtopic sheet. We'll be giving you handouts throughout. Okay, is everybody kind of keying in where we're at? Perfect. All right, on January 29th, 1963, poet Robert Frost died at the age of 88. On January 29th, 1963, poet Robert Frost died at the age of 88. Why do I tell you about that? What does that have to do with anything we're going to be talking about? He must have a tie to John Kennedy somehow. And what he did is one of the mourners present at Frost's funeral was President Kennedy. They were both New Englanders, and Kennedy asked Frost to read a poem at his inauguration, which he did in 1961. So Robert Frost dies on January 29th, 1988, and one of the mourners present at Frost's funeral was President Kennedy.
1962, 1988.
Did I say 88? He died at the age of 88 in 1963. Now, again, President Kennedy asked Frost prior to his inauguration to read a poem, which he agreed to do. And I'm going to tell you, it's kind of an interesting story how this came about. How old was Robert Frost during the inauguration, approximately?
85.
85 or 86. So he was elderly. Okay? Now, Kennedy had asked Frost prior to the inauguration if he planned to recite a new poem at his inauguration, and if he would, that's what he'd prefer, but if he didn't want to, he wanted him to recite the poem, The Gift Outright. That's the name of the poem. It's on your ID sheet. You need to write it down. So Kennedy asked Frost if he was going to come up with a new poem for his inauguration, and he said he wasn't sure, and he said, well, if you don't feel up to it, then go ahead, if you would, and read The Gift Outright. Well, as inauguration day approached, Frost actually composed a new poem entitled Dedication that he was going to give at Kennedy's inauguration. He composed a brand new poem at the president's request entitled Dedication. And that's the one that he was going to read at the inauguration of President Kennedy. Well, on Inauguration Day, Frost was concerned whether he'd be able to read the poem or not, for a couple reasons. He typed it on the hotel typewriter the night before inauguration, and it was not real dark. And of course, he's 86 years old, so he's a little bit concerned on Inauguration Day if he's going to be able to read it. Okay? So as he's driving to the Capitol to get ready for the inauguration, he's thinking about that. Gee whiz, I wonder if I'm going to be able to read this thing. Because he had just typed the poem, if you can imagine, on a hotel typewriter the night before. Well, when Frost stood to recite the poem after President Kennedy's inaugural address, remember what kind of a day it was there? What kind of a day was inauguration? It was cold. Well, it was sunny but cold. And what had it done the night before? Snow. So the wind was blowing a little bit, and the sun's reflection off the new fallen snow made it impossible for Frost to read this. He could not see this poem, Dedication, that he wanted to read. He couldn't see it. So what do you think he did? Very good. He said the other poem straight from memory. The Gift Outright. Said it from memory. Now, Frost was somewhat embarrassed later about his inability to deliver the poem that he had written, but it actually went down in history as a pretty memorable and historic event because Robert Frost was considered one of the greatest poets of all time. And so he was unable to give the poem that he wanted to, Dedication, so he simply read the gift outright instead. And so here's a little handout, and this is one of many you're going to get that we won't take time to read here, but you take time on your own to read it if you would, and kind of remember that everything I give you is kind of fair game. The point I want to make is if you look at the bottom part of this handout, you see the gift outright in his handwriting, and then you can see, if you're interested in the poem, actually what it says. And it also shows his copy of dedication up here that he was unable to read
Did you
off.
ever publish that?
Which one? Oh, yeah. Yeah, matter of fact, you know, that's a great question. I'll just read one excerpt here. It says, as Inauguration Day approached, however, Frost surprised himself by composing a new poem, Dedication, later retitled for John F. Kennedy, his inauguration. So it's in a book. If you buy a book of poems by Robert Frost, it'll be in there. Both of them. One he gave, one he did. Okay, moving on to February then. February 22nd. On February 22nd, 1963, the first metal tennis racket was patented by French tennis champion René Lacoste. On February 22nd, 1963, the first metal tennis racket was patented by French tennis champion René Lacoste. So prior to this time, everybody used wood tennis rackets. First one that was made out of metal was patented by René Lacoste, French champion. That's not all he was famous for. Now, I don't know how stylish you guys are, especially you fellers. What else did he invent? What else did he invent? You should know this, because I bet you have one.
Doesn't he have a brand of clothes?
Yeah, what are they?
The crocodile thing?
Thank you very much. Actually, very good. Lacoste also introduced the alligator polo shirt, which was very, very popular in the late 70s and early 80s. Somebody here a couple years ago went to school, high school kid wore those all the time. I don't remember who it was. Oh, Logan Franson had. Yeah, he did. And you know what? I ordered one. Don't believe the sizes on eBay. A double XL would maybe fit you. I mean, so I gave that one to Franson.
I bet it's really expensive.
You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah.
Aren't they more popular in Europe?
Yes, we use that in my country, but they're really expensive.
Are you in Europe?
No.
No.
Well, he said yes. I'm getting even here.
No,
Now, are they popular in Argentina?
Yes.
But they are popular in Europe as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
Yes.
Do you have any here?
I don't know. I have to check that.
Well, hey, if you don't, have Mama send you one from Argentina to wear it one day. Maybe you could get some extra credit. All right, March 21st, 1963. The federal prison on Alcatraz Island in the San Francisco Bay closed its doors to prisoners forever. Yep. March 21st, 1963, the federal prison on Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay closed its doors to prisoners forever. What is it now?
It's like
The tourist trap, yeah.
I wouldn't go in there.
Now, the significance of Alcatraz Island, and the reason it was in San Francisco Bay is because it was supposed to be unescapable. You couldn't escape from it. And it even housed the famous killer Al Capone, gangster Al Capone. That's where they stuck kind of the worst out there, so they wouldn't escape. Now, there was a story, Clint Eastwood actually starred in a movie called Escape from Alcatraz Island, which was made in, I think, the 70s or whatever, that it portrays a true story of three guys that supposedly escaped. Now, why did they close it down, do you think?
Building codes.
Well, the rumor is because those guys escaped, and they escaped the inescapable island. But what did you say?
Building codes?
Not so much that.
Funding?
Funding. Here's an example. The average expense in the United States to house a prisoner per day was $5.40 at the time. It cost $5.40 to house a prisoner for 1 day in America. The cost at Alcatraz Island was $13 a day per prisoner. So it was almost 3 times as much, and it got to be too costly. So on that date of March 21st, 1963, the federal prison at Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay closed its doors. Yes.
What was the price?
13 a day at Alcatraz compared to $5.40 a day everywhere else. Okay, April 17th, 1963. The National Football League was rocked by scandal. Rocked by scandal. The National Football League was rocked by scandal on April 17, 1963. What happened? Who's the commissioner of the NFL right now? Anybody know?
Roger Goodell.
Roger Goodell. At the time, it was a guy by the name of Pete Rozelle. Pete Rozelle. It's not on your ID sheet, but I'll spell it for you. Pete Rozelle was the commissioner of the National Football League in 1963, and he found that two of the game's best players were caught gambling, which you could not do. So he suspended both of them for the rest of the season. They gambled on league games, which is against the NFL policy. Now, these two players were superstars at the time. One was a running back by the name of Paul Hornung of the Green Bay Packers, and the other one was a defensive tackle by the name of Alex Karras of the Detroit Lions. This would be like suspending, who's the best running back in the NFL? Adrian Peterson and J.C. Watt. It'd be like suspending two of the best players in the NFL. So it was a big deal. J.J. What'd I say? J.C. Watt actually was a quarterback for Oklahoma that's in the legislature, it's in the House right now.
Who did Alex play for?
Alex played for the Detroit Tigers.
Lion?
The
Lions, there you go.
Tigers or
See if you're catching on here. Detroit Tigers of the NFL.
Bengals?
He was a great, great player. Both of these guys were so good that they eventually became members of the NFL Hall of Fame. But this particular year, their teams went without them because they were gambling on league games. Now, the sad thing about this, for me, as I teach this over the years, is I get a year older and seniors stay the same age. So a lot of these people are passing away that we're talking about. This happened on October 10th, 2012, when Alex Karras died. I'm just going to read a little bit of this to you, the first part. Alex Karras was one of the NFL's most feared defensive tackles throughout the 1960s, a player who hounded quarterbacks and bowled past opposing linemen. The rugged player who anchored the Detroit Lions defense and made a successful transition to an acting career with a stint along the way as a commentator on Monday Night Football died Wednesday. He was 77. Karras had recently suffered kidney failure and had been diagnosed with dementia. The Lions also said he had suffered from heart disease and for the past 2 years stomach cancer. He died at his home in Los Angeles surrounded by family members and Craig Mitnick, his attorney. Now, he was one of these guys that his life had deteriorated after football, they thought because of head injuries sustained during his career. Back in those days, they didn't worry about concussions, and you should see the helmets. I have a helmet from the 60s in my office. I'll bring it and show you the suspension inside one of these helmets compared to today. These guys got, in those days you could come off the line and slap the guy across the head. There was none of these rules you have now in protecting anybody. And so a lot of these NFL players sued, these old NFL players just sued the NFL and got a substantial amount of money not long ago because of conditions they played under at the time. Well, Karras is one of the very best, and when he and Paul Hornung of the Green Bay Packers got suspended for the year of football, it was a big, big news in the nation. Okay, May of 1963. No date. Ursula Andress and Sean Connery starred in the popular James Bond movie entitled Dr. No. One of many James Bond movies. Dr. No, just May. That was the great movie that was out in '63. Dr. No, another one of the James Bond series. There's been James Bond series going on since the 60s. Been several different James Bonds. Sean Connery might have been the most popular James Bond. If I'm thinking of him, if you don't know who Sean Connery is, did you ever see the movie The Rock with Nicolas Cage where they were on Alcatraz Island with the Navy SEALs and that whole business? Did you ever see that? Sean Connery was the elderly actor who was the former criminal that they got out of jail. Yep. He's a good actor. But anyway, Ursula Andress, whenever you had these James Bond movies, they always got a foreign actress, sexy as could be, that James Bond always ended up with. Well, Ursula Andress just happened to be the European model that starred in this particular movie. Very, very popular. Okay, June 19th, 1963. Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in the world to enter space, circling the globe 48 times in 3 days. June 19th, 1963, Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in the world to enter space, circling the globe 48 times in 3 days. Another point the Russians got on us in the race for space.
I thought we already won.
No, we don't win until we get on the moon, man.
Yeah, man.
We got a lot of space to talk about. Got a lot of space to talk about before we're done. Apollo, we got it all. July 21st. Okay. 3 days, 48 times around the globe.
What was the date?
June 19th. July 21st. President Kennedy named Howard Jenkins to the National Labor Relations Board. On July 21st, 1963, President Kennedy names Howard Jenkins to the National Labor Relations Board. What's the National Labor Relations Board? Anybody know?
Is that where they like decide minimum wage?
No, not so much
Are those
that.
the ones who run labor unions?
Sort of. Like, for example, if I'm working for the city of Worland and they promised me a raise and they didn't give it to me, I could file a grievance at the local labor relations board. And if I didn't like that, then I could appeal to the state. And if I didn't like that, then I could appeal it to the National Labor Relations Board. It's for those people, so people can be treated correctly. Okay? So having him to the National Labor Relations Board is big. What's the significance? Why do I tell you that? Because he's black. Okay? He's a Negro. Okay? And so that was another key appointment by President Kennedy in a big-time position. Howard Jenkins, named to the National Labor Relations Board. We'll move on to August 6th, 1963. On August 6th, 1963, Jackie Kennedy gives birth to a son, Patrick Bouvier Kennedy. Patrick Bouvier. Patrick Bouvier Kennedy. On August 6, 1963. The baby was born premature. He weighed 4 pounds, 10 ounces at birth. 4 pounds, 10 ounces. Very premature. And because of the condition of the baby, Mrs. Kennedy was transferred to the Children's Hospital in Boston so they could care for the child.
And 4 pounds what?
4 pounds, 10 ounces. Very premature. And in those days, a preemie baby was much more concerning than today. So they transferred Mrs. Kennedy and the baby to the Children's Hospital in Boston. Well, obviously, in those days, it was a little bit different. Men were not always there for the birth of their children. It was just different. A lot of times they were not. Well, President Kennedy, and of course he's the president, he gets news that the child's been born and has some difficulties, so he arrives at the Children's Hospital about 8 p.m. that night to visit his son, who's in pretty grave condition, in bad shape. Very prematurely born, not doing well at all. So President Kennedy arrives at the Children's Hospital in Boston around 8 p.m. to see his new son, who is in grave condition. As the president arrived at the hospital, he was met by Jackie's doctor, who briefed him on the situation on the way up to his wife's room. So the president was met at the Children's Hospital by the doctor. As they ride up the elevator to go to the room in which Jackie is with the child, the president is briefed on the child's condition. And her room is in the ICU unit of the hospital because the little guy is in bad shape. Now, as the president gets off the elevator and heads towards his wife's room in the ICU unit, he passes a room on his way with two little girls who both suffered from very severe burns. They were in the ICU unit for reasons of seriousness as well. So as he's walking to his wife's room to see how his child is doing, he passes a room with two little girls in there who are suffering from severe burns. He stopped at their room and told Secret Service agent Lawrence Newman, who was escorting him, that he would like to leave a note to each of those children. So he stops on the way to see his wife. He notices two other children in pretty tough shape. He tells Secret Service agent Lawrence Newman, who's escorting him, that he would like to stop and write a note to each of the children. So Newman asks a nurse to get some paper for the president, and the nurse gives the president the names of the two little girls. So Newman asks the nurse to get a piece of paper, two pieces of paper, one for each girl, for the president, and the nurse gives Newman the paper and the names of the little girls. The president takes the time to write each of those little girls a note, and then proceeded down the hallway to see his son. He didn't have to do that, but he did. Stopped and took some time. I would hate to even guess where those notes, if they even exist, would be. I have never seen any
You know what he
evidence.
wrote?
Nope, don't know what he wrote either. So he goes down to see his son, who unfortunately dies the next day because his lungs were too premature to survive. So the president goes down and visits his son, who unfortunately dies the next day because his lungs are underdeveloped and he could not survive. So another Kennedy tragedy. So that's what happened in August of 1963. Okay, September 26th. And this starts to set up the reason Kennedy goes to Texas, which eventually will lead to his assassination. Okay, so now we're kind of getting on track here. On September 26th, Kennedy announced that he would be taking a trip to the state of Texas. He announced that he would be taking a trip to Texas, and he announced that on September 26th. And the reason the president wanted to go to Texas is he was thinking of the upcoming election of 1964. Now at this time, Texas amounted to 25 electoral votes, and it was a state that he believed he would need to win to be reelected in 64. And he wanted to go there to mend some political fences in Texas. Mend political fences. So on September 26, 1963, President Kennedy announced he would take a trip to the state of Texas. He was thinking about the upcoming presidential election in 1964. He was going to go to Texas to mend political fences there because it amounted to 25 important electoral votes. Now, if he's going there to mend political fences, where does he have problems? What? Well, within what? You're a little more specific, you're getting close. Where has he got problems? Why would he go there to mend political fences? Who's he going to mend them within? Within his own party, right? He's got differences in his own party that he thinks will hurt his chances of re-election in 64. Now the struggle was the liberal and conservative wings of the Texas Democratic Party were fighting. You cannot fight in politics within your own party. We talked about early in the school year that a Democratic candidate has to win all of his constituents and 50% of the Republicans at that time by basis on who declared they were Democrat and who did Republican. So there were some problems within the party. And the problems surrounded the three most influential politicians in Texas. That's who the struggle was between. And those were Vice President Johnson, Texas Governor John Connally, and Texas Senator Ralph Yarborough. Those three men were having problems within the party that Kennedy felt he better go get straightened out, or he was going to have an issue in '64 winning that state. So again, the three big players, the most powerful politicians in Texas that were feuding, were Vice President Johnson, Texas Governor John Connally, and Texas Senator Ralph Yarborough. Those three were fighting. So obviously we have three there, so what do we got here? Okay, there's two views, liberal and conservative, and there's three people. So what do we have here? 2 against 1, okay? Here is how it played out. Lyndon Johnson was very angry at Ralph Yarborough because of his support in the election of 1960. What does that tell you? Who did Yarborough support for the presidency in '60? No. Johnson's upset. What? He supported Kennedy. Yarborough's a senator from Texas, damn it, he's supposed to be loyal to Texas. But he's a liberal. So he supported Kennedy for the presidency in 1960. Well, that ticked off Johnson big time, because Johnson thought he should be loyal to his home state. Connally, the governor of Texas, and Johnson were good friends, and both conservatives. So it was basically Vice President Johnson and Governor Connally against Yarborough. And what was Yarborough afraid they were going to do? What's coming up in '64? Not only a presidential election, but other elections. House elections, Senate elections, etc. So what was Yarborough thinking that those two were going to do? No, not run for Senate, but find somebody else to run against him in the primaries. And it caused a tremendous rift between the two. All three were up for re-election in '64. Connally for the governorship, Johnson for the vice presidency, and Yarborough for the Senate. And Yarborough was really paranoid that Connally and Johnson were going to try to find a candidate to run against him in the primary. That's kind of what you have right now in Wyoming with Senator Enzi and Liz Cheney. They're in the same party and they're going to run against each other in the primary. That's going to be, they're going to spend more money in that primary than they'll ever spend in the general election on whoever the winner runs against. That's a bad deal. That's a split in the Wyoming Republican Party right now between those two. That's what you don't want. Okay? Now, President Kennedy knew that this dispute between the three political giants in Texas had to be halted if they were going to win Texas in '64. And that's why he went to Texas in the first place. That's important that you know that. Okay, we'll move on to October 24th. And again, this sets the stage for the assassination too. October 24th, 1963. Dallas, Texas was sponsoring United Nations Day. The city of Dallas, Texas was sponsoring United Nations Day. So, members of the United Nations from all over the world were coming to Dallas for a convention. Who would be there representing the United States? Adlai Stevenson, right? So, on October 24th, 1963, United States Ambassador Adlai Stevenson visited Dallas, Texas to speak at UN Day. About 2,000 people attended the program. About 100 of those 2,000 were right-wing extremists. Right-wing extremists. And what do right-wing extremists do at a convention? What do they do? You're close. They'd be a pain in the butt. They just are a pain. They're antagonistic. Well, these 100 right-wing extremists, their own reason for being there was to show their displeasure, dislike for the United Nations in general. So, during Stevenson's speech in which he gave, they disrupted him 3 ways. They disrupted his speech 3 ways. These right-wing extremists disrupted his speech in 3 ways. Adlai Stevenson's speech. While he was speaking, they were doing things to aggravate him and disrupt his speech. And some of them were incredibly immature. Obviously, they were yelling and shouting. They were talking when he was talking. They were raising hell when he was trying to give his speech. Okay, pretty easy one. Unpatriotically, they were walking up and down the aisles carrying U.S. flags upside down. They were walking up and down the aisles during his speech carrying United States flags upside down. And the most immature thing they did is they coughed in cadence when he was giving his speech. Something like this. In cadence, and then somebody over here be doing it. They just did everything they could to disrupt his speech. Now you got to know Stevenson. Stevenson was an interesting character, kind of quiet and reserved, but he could get mad. But when he got mad, he never showed his anger. He just was sarcastic. And so as they're doing this, finally, he pauses in his speech and he says the following. Surely, my friends, I don't have to come here from Illinois to teach Texas manners, do I? That's what he said to the crowd, which irritated him to the point when he was walking from the auditorium, one of the extremists hit him over the head with a sign. He also got spat on as he left. And here's a picture of a lovely lady hitting him over the head with her protest sign. You can tell.
What did he do?
He was just got out of there, basically. He wasn't treated very well in Dallas. That's the key to remember. He wasn't treated well in Dallas because some of the people in Dallas were against the United Nations, right? Anyway, you can see this lady with her tongue in cheek there, so to speak. And you can see the sign as it... You can't see Stevenson's head, but you can see the sign over his head. He was a guy, he was just shaking his hand. He was talking to a guy, and then the lady went whacked him over the head with a sign. And he got spat upon as well. That's a key coming up. Okay, a couple more and we'll be done. I got to give you something else. November 1st, on November 1st, 1963, that was the day that Press Secretary Pierre Salinger announced to the nation that President Kennedy planned to inspect military installations in both Florida and Texas. On November 1st, 1963, Press Secretary Pierre Salinger announced publicly that President Kennedy planned to inspect military installations in both Florida and Texas. And during these inspections of military installations in both Florida and Texas, it would include speeches by the President and motorcade tours in 5 cities in each state. So on November 1st, 1963, Pierre Salinger, Press Secretary, announced that President Kennedy planned to inspect military installations in both Florida and Texas, and along with these inspections would include speeches by the President and motorcade tours in 5 cities in each state.
So it's handful.
Yep, you know what a motorcade tour is? It's like a parade where you have the President and his entourage parading through an area, which is what happens in Texas and Dallas. So that's what happened on November 1st. Okay, November 21st, 1963. President Kennedy begins his fateful trip to Dallas, Texas. On November 21st, 1963, President John F. Kennedy begins his fateful trip to Dallas, Texas. Now, that will take us tomorrow to Prelude to Assassination. We're going to talk to you about what President Kennedy does outside of Dallas.
Did he go to Dallas first?
No, he didn't. He went back and forth. Now here's another thing I have for you. 2 more things. Okay, you need to really pay attention to this because this is worth some points. And it needs to be completed by a deadline.
Oh, I don't like this. Is this when you have to ask them what they were doing?
Yep, now get specifics on it. Now last year when I did this, you guys didn't do a very good job getting it back. It didn't matter, but we'll this year.
United States.
Okay, explain. This is not for you. Just read this though. Please explain in detail exactly what you were doing when you received the news that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Please feel free to add additional pages if necessary. Turn, yeah, you need one?
No, I got this.
Okay, turn it over. This assignment must be given to a person 65 years of age or older. I don't care who it is, but they have to be 65. They have to fill out the back. The name of the student you are supplying affidavit to, the relationship to the student, their printed name, and they need to sign it. This is due November 22nd, 2013.
That's fun.
You can turn it in advance. You cannot turn in late. Okay, it will be worth 25 points. Yes.
So, like, can I fill out the bag if I, like, call my grandma?
Well, she's got to sign it.
Well, she lives in Utah.
Well, I don't know what she needs to do something.
Oldest for
Yeah.
I don't have anyone.
You got a lot of ways to do it nowadays. Hey, 65 or over, because otherwise they may not have a good recollection. Doesn't have to be anybody you're related to. It could be your next door neighbor, your friend, whoever. This is due November 22nd, 1963 at the top start of the class period. I'll take it sooner. Yeah. How old am I? 55. You weren't even thinking I was 65? You are out of here, Smith. I was 5 years old when the president. You want to hear my story? This is the truth. Now, this is what my mother told me, so I don't remember all this. I was 5 years old. In those days, we didn't have kindergarten. And I was sitting in the living room in Laurel, Montana. My mother was in the kitchen. My dad was working. And I evidently heard this on the news, because the TV was on, and I went and told my mother that President Kennedy had been shot. And she scolded me for saying such a thing. She did. And I said, well, and I kind of felt bad. I said, where did it happen? He said, well, she said, where'd you hear that? And I said, on the TV. So anyway, nice phone, whoever's going on.
Mr. McGee, your cellular device.
Oh,
It's okay. Anyway, then she went out because she felt bad. She had kind of scolded me. She could tell by the look on my face. And so she went out and for the next 4 days was glued to the television. That's how it was. So, but I don't remember. Most kids, you know, I can remember very, very distinctly where I was when the space shuttle blew up that had Krista McAuliffe, the teacher. I was teaching history in Circle, Montana. Everybody has their own date. But anyway, if you would get that done, that would be great. We would appreciate it. Okay? I will give you another thing we're going to do tomorrow, but we'll hold it for tomorrow. Who's not here? Only Kylie?
And Clay.